Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Meck, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association for Middle Level Education. And we welcome you to Understanding and Implementing the Successful Middle School. This we believe. We're really happy to have with us this evening guest speakers and one of our regulars, Judy Brew. Judy is very, very well known in Pennsylvania and internationally as not only a teacher, an educator, but a great consultant, especially her work on understanding our founding fathers of middle level education. And our second regular is Gail Heinemeyer. Gail, an experienced veteran educator from southeastern Pennsylvania in the Ridley School District, has presented nationally with AMLE and is really the head of the Institute right now. Gail is usually our moderator. Tonight, she's going to be one of our key presenters. And all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, one of Pennsylvania's favorite friends, Linda Hopping. Linda has been state director in Georgia for the Georgia Middle School Association. She's been actively involved at the state and national level, both AMLE and the National Forum. Certainly a very, very skilled writer and presenter. Linda, we're so happy to have you with us this evening. Yes. So to all of our guest attendees, we're so happy you're here. We want you to be a part of PMLE and enjoy our webinars, which are held the second Wednesday of each month at 7:00 p.m. Don't miss January, when we'll be having Jen Court back, and she's going to be talking about some very important things for the future. So when you think about the future and how you're going to handle it and the uncertainties that are involved with it, Jen Court is a great person to be familiar with. On with our webinar. Gail?
Okay, thank you, Paul, and welcome to everyone. We're glad that you have joined us this evening. We're very excited to share with you some information about the new landmark position paper from AMLE, The Successful Middle School, This We Believe. A couple of norms just as we conduct our webinar this evening. We ask that you do keep that microphone on mute unless we call upon you to either share a comment or ask a question. You can use either the chat or the Q&A feature to ask a question, and generally you'll see those at the bottom of your screen on your toolbar. We will also be available to you at the conclusion of the webinar if you have additional questions. We're happy to hang around and take a few of those questions from you. I'm going to encourage you to keep your cell phone handy so that you can participate in some polls that we're going to try to run. This is a new piece that we've added this evening. www.slido.com. So we're going to try two polls, one of them coming up in just a minute. But most importantly, we really encourage you to be an active listener. The information that we're going to share with you is really important for you to think about in terms of what does this mean for my school? And I think as you're looking at the foundational paper of the Successful Middle School, This We Believe, it's really kind of the mirror to which you want to reflect your school's practices, your programs, your policies, and really think about how you, either in an individual classroom or in a school setting, can address many of those characteristics and attributes that we talk about as part of the successful middle school. All right, so now let's see if this will work for us. Nope. All right, so we're going to go right on. Judy, could you kind of explain what our objectives for tonight are going to be, please?
I can, if I can unmute myself. Okay. Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for giving time to us in this busy month and crazy year. Our objectives for this session are here in this slide. We want to make sure that everybody understands the beliefs that the founders of the middle level movement had. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with all of those wonderful gentlemen, and I want to make sure that their legacy continues. We also want to explain the evolution of This We Believe. The first one came out in 1982, and it was really a statement from then the National Middle School Association to try to explain what good middle schools try to accomplish. Then we're going to try to review the components of the successful middle school, this we believe, which is the newest edition that Gail and Linda are going to provide information on, and to give you some tools in order to try to implement some of these components and policies of procedures in your schools, and also to share the resources that are available to help bring it all to light.
Thank you, Judy. So one of the things that we want to talk about is what is the history of the 5 editions of This We Believe, because we think it's important for you that are working in middle level schools right now, understand that the things that we are talking about, the things that we are suggesting are the research-based programs and practices really have their roots back in the beginning of the middle level movement. And as Judy mentioned, the first position paper that NMSA at that time, the National Middle School Association, the first paper that they published was This We Believe in 1982. And at that time, they described 10 characteristics that they felt were essential in middle level schools. Now you can see, as you look at the graphic here, that over the course of time, as we have revised and updated that edition, we have also come to realize that there are some additional characteristics that are really important in terms of what it is that needs to be included in your middle level school. So when we did the first revision in 1995, we now moved up to 12 characteristics. And we also talked about this as being the developmentally responsible middle level schools, saying we really want to make sure that you understand what we are doing are addressing the unique needs of those young adolescents ages 10 to 15 who are in our middle level schools. In 2003, we now went to 16 characteristics. And again, we looked at this as the successful schools for young adolescents. Again, it's briefed in what is it that we need to address the needs of those kids that are sitting in our buildings. By 2010, that revision stated the 16 characteristics and described what we called the keys to educating young adolescents. And now we're most excited about the edition that has just been released, The Successful Middle School, This We Believe. One of the things that we have discovered is that there were a few additional characteristics that we needed to add. And what we would like you to think about is, as you're looking at what those 18 characteristics are, and if you don't happen to have a copy of the book, this is a great time to get one because AMLE is offering free shipping through the end of December. So get your copy. And if you don't have that, go to the AMLE website and go under the tab for This We Believe, and it will define those 18 characteristics for you. Needless to say, in the time we have tonight, we can't really go through 18 of them, although we'll try. But what we want to do is at least get you exposed to what those characteristics are. And as we said, all of this ties back to the work done originally by the founding fathers. And we think it's important that you're aware of who those folks are. So Judy, if you would take a moment and kind of explain who these gentlemen were and what some of their basic beliefs were that lead to where we are today.
I would love to. I love these guys. Unfortunately, they have all passed away. William Alexander is fondly known as the father of middle level education. He's really the one who spearheaded the move from the junior high movement into middle school. And then the rest of these fellows started doing some practical work with them. Al Arth started doctoral level programs at the University of Wyoming, where I got to work with him in my postdoc studies. He was really interested in meeting the needs of individual kids, especially kids who he called squirrely. That he found a lot of the kids who kind of acted out in order to fit in. Don Eichorn, Pennsylvania's own Don Eichorn, is known for developmentally appropriate middle schools. He co-founded with Dr. Alan Drash from the University of Pittsburgh, the Boyce Medical Study, which was the first landmark study of the physical and social psychological characteristics of middle school kids. He did that in Upper St. Clair, Pennsylvania, and a lot of what we know about kids' characteristics actually come from the Boyce Medical Studies. So if you're interested in studying that, I'd be happy to give you some information about it too. Conrad Tepfer, it was my mentor at the University of Buffalo. Conrad was the only member, white member of the Black Jazz Musicians Union in Buffalo, New York. He had an undying need, I would say, for social justice and equity, and worked very hard to get equitable education for middle level kids. Gordon Vars was the first president of the National Middle School Association, very interested in curriculum. He was one of the people who began with the idea of integrating the curriculum and not going necessarily by the regular subjects that we're used to. And John Lounsbury, who was probably one of the kindest people I have ever known in my life, known as the conscience of middle level education. Very prolific guy, was the editor of Middle School Journal for years and years, and was very instrumental in getting a lot of very good quality research and publications out there, because there hadn't been much work in middle school before him. So these are the guys who were basing a lot of this from. They were also, along with a guy named Charles Cherry, were the first authors of this, we believe. John was actually the editor, and the rest of them were writing it. So their advice is to practice, base your practice on research. They were all very, very sure that just doing what felt right was not the way to go about it, that there's a reason why we do each of these things. There's a reason why each of the components is absolutely necessary. They all believed in meaningful relationships, not only kids with kids, but teachers with kids, teachers with administrators, administrators with kids, parents involved, and community members involved. So all of these guys really believed that the school was like a family, and it had that tenor to it. So it was very supportive of all of the stakeholders in the school. They also realized, thank heavens, that kids and educators are going to make mistakes, and there's no one size fits all. So what works for one kid isn't necessarily going to work with another kid. You know, I look back at my first year of teaching, and I just hope I didn't mess them up for the rest of their lives, because I really didn't know what I was doing, since I was elementary certified and teaching was in sixth grade and had no idea what I was doing. They also wanted to make sure that teachers and educators and parents understood that the kids are very unsure of themselves. They're starting to move from childhood into adolescence. And Don Eichhorn came up with the term transcendent, because he said they're not pubescents and they're not adolescents. They're in that time of becoming. And so sometimes they act like little kids. Sometimes they disdain, like, you're treating me like a little kid, I'm an adult, and they don't know. They're really turbulent. And think of them now, because in good times, they have angst. In a year like this, they've got to be going through an awful lot of tough decision making and being very unsure of themselves. We know that we have to give the kids choices. Telling kids you will do this, they knew was not going to be the way that we get them to engage. And don't try to organize everything the right way. There is no right way. And I have to add this, because this is my last hurrah for tonight. Even though this, we believe, is a series of components of middle school, they're not things that you just check off. Like, oh, we do advisory stuff, check. You know, we do exploration, check. Conrad used to say all the time, he'd come in from visiting in a school, And he'd say, yeah, they had all the components for This We Believe. He would say, they got the words, but they ain't got the tune. It's the tune that's important. And just to finish up, I'm going to give you a very quick example. When my own daughter went into middle school, I was very excited because I thought she's going to get exploratory, integrated kinds of experiences. And they were signing up for exploratory courses. And she came home and I was so excited. I said, Casey, what did you sign up for? What did you get as your exploratory? And she said, Silent Movie Club, Disney Movie Club. And I said, Silent Disney Movie Club? What is that? And she said, well, we watch Disney movies, but we all have to shut up. So of course I went into the principal and I said, Ed, what Silent Movie Club, Disney Movie Club, what is that? And he said, well, you know, exploratory. I said, what's the purpose of exploratory? He said, it's to give the kids a break. I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. Exploratory is to give kids experiences that they may not otherwise have. So here they had checked off the box for exploration. They had the words, but they didn't have the tune. So here's a nice quote from Alexander. Those schools have to stimulate the child, a love for learning, an attitude of inquiry, a passion for truth and beauty, a questioning mind. The learning of right answers is not enough. Beyond answers alone, we must help children ask the right questions and discover their answers through creative thinking, reasoning, judging, and understanding. So getting them to do a lot of reflection, giving them those choices, letting them pursue their own interests was of great importance and still is. Gail?
Thanks, Judy. And that's something, again, we want you to recognize the fact that when we talk about the 18 characteristics that are in today's version of This We Believe, they are rooted in the words, and you hear the voices of those founding fathers coming through. We didn't eliminate any of the characteristics that they initially identified back in 1982, but recognize the fact that there has been that much more research. There's now much more that we know about the needs of young adolescents, and that has been incorporated in This We Believe because it has been an organic document. It has grown over time and reflected what it is that we've now learned about dealing with young adolescents. So Linda, could you kind of give us a little bit of an overview of the book itself?
I'd be happy to do that. This is, as Gail just said, the 5th edition of This We Believe, and it's called The Successful Middle School This We Believe. It's a much more comprehensive, I think is a good word, look at This We Believe, because it includes some things that have not necessarily been in previous editions. As the middle school evolves, we need to evolve. We need to guide the evolving middle school, actually. So it starts out with the importance of middle level education. And this is a lot of what Judy was just talking about. This is where they deal with, why do we have middle level education? Why is it so important? And why do we need to make sure that we keep that philosophy in our schools? And then it has essential attributes and characteristics. And the 4th edition was the first time we put in essential attributes, the things that truly guide all of the characteristics. They fit into these essential attributes. And in doing the new edition, as we sat and talked about it, I happened to be in the meeting where they were talking about that. We realized that we actually had the need now for a 5th essential attribute. So we added one more attribute. And that's the beauty to me of This We Believe. It's exciting to me to sit down and read the 1st edition and then go through and compare and see the evolution of the middle school as you go through to this one. So it's always evolving. That's why we keep adding a new edition every once in a while. Then, of course, we have the 3 areas of characteristics. And we did a little revision of that in that we put culture and community first this time. always before we've had curriculum, instruction, assessment, leadership, organization, and then culture and community. And I think it's very appropriate to put culture and community first. Because if you go into a middle school and the culture and the community of that school is not positive, does not show you people working together for a common good, then you can kind of forget curriculum, instruction, and assessment, because it's not going to happen until you've dealt with the culture and community. So that's why we have switched the position of those two. And then it also deals with young adolescent development. And what are the implications for educators when we talk about young adolescent development? And Gail, I'd just like to add one more thing. It's not on this slide, but this edition is also exciting. I was really excited to see that there's student voice all through this edition. We've not really had that before, but there are poems that children have written that are included in the book. There's artwork that they have produced that is a part of this book. And there are little clips that have quotes from the kids that fit into some of the characteristics that they talk about. That was really exciting to me. It kind of made it come alive and really put it back into the schoolroom where the kids are. So I really enjoyed that. And the other thing I would say is that I think this edition is very timely because we are in a year like no other, absolutely no other. And I really worry, and when I talk to principals, they too are worried that if we're not careful, there is a chance that when we finally come back to school as it was, it won't be as it was. That this has provided an opportunity to go away from that middle school philosophy. You know, are we still going to have teams? Because a lot of the virtual learning is not by team. We're going to have to be very careful to sell the middle school story again. And I think this book is what we use as a basis of ensuring that when we do go back to school, we go back to middle school. So.
And that really is a key point that again, we recognize now that the research that has led us to where we are has identified what are those things that really speak to the young adolescent. And so we don't want to lose those pieces moving forward, although we know there are going to be all kinds of pressures that might cause some of those pieces to go away. But that's why it's important for you to look at that opening section of the book, the importance of middle level education. Why is it that the founders felt it was important to design something that was neither elementary nor secondary, that junior high school really wasn't appropriate for these kids that were in between, in that transition stage? And so why is it important to really single out middle level education and design something for kids 10 to 15 years old?
And I think it's interesting when you look at that section, you realize that what William Alexander was saying in 1963, what the other founders were preaching in the 70s and the 80s is still true today. It hasn't changed. The essentials of middle level education, the importance of it, those things are still at the core of what we are. And to me, that's amazing that over this long span of time, the absolute essential things about middle school have not changed that much.
And that's true. And Linda mentioned how we reorganized the way in which the characteristics are presented in the book. One of the things that I might have thought about and done a little differently was beginning with the end in mind, the young adolescent. Who are they? What do they look like? Maybe that was the piece that we really ought to be starting with. If we're beginning with the end in mind, the goal is educating young adolescents. So who are those kids? What do we know about them? And I myself, I know when I go back and look at this and think, okay, when I was sitting as an undergraduate and I was taking those required ed psych classes, I really couldn't rationalize why was that important? What difference is it going to make to me? It wasn't until I got into teaching for quite some time that I really began to reflect and go, oh yeah, now I know why they were talking about those things.
Mhm.
And so when we're looking at the characteristics of young adolescents, those pieces become really important. So Linda, do you want to review what those four major areas are?
Yeah, they're basically four areas of development for young adolescents, and they are the physical characteristics, cognitive characteristics, social, emotional, and psychological. And they are all working together to produce a child in the middle. And Judy, I think, is going to talk about how important that whole concept is. But we need to take advantage. When we look at constructing learning, when we look at dealing with our children, when we look at advisory, when we look at just who we are and how we relate to these kids, we need to be very aware of where they are in each one of these areas of development, because they all come together. And we can't deal with just cognitive or just psychological. We have to deal with all four of them at one time. So, and that's what makes it so exciting. I've always said, middle school teachers, you either love those kids or you hate them. If you hate them, you don't need to be there. But it's fun. They're fun. They are just incredible kids, but we need to be very aware of where they are.
Thanks, Linda. Judy, could you kind of address this piece about the change that takes place during that period of adolescence?
Unmute. Judy, you need to unmute.
Yes,
Unmute.
thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
This information basically came from a doctor by the name of John Tanner, who came up with 5 Tanner units to describe the physical growth of young adolescents. And then this was actually studied by Don Eichhorn and Alan Drash in that Boyce medical study. And what they found is that, first of all, kids were maturing earlier and earlier. They found that girls actually were starting to menstruate 4 months earlier every decade. At one point, somebody said if Booth Tarkington were to write 17 today, he'd have to call it 12. The kids are reaching puberty earlier and earlier, and it is a huge change for the kids in a very short period of time. So those of you who look at 6th graders, and so many of them, especially the boys, who are about 1.5 years, 2 years slower in physical development than the girls, those little boys in 6th grade very often look like little leprechauns, you know. And you have in the same class somebody who's usually a girl who is on Tanner level 5, which is totally adolescent. And the thing is that cognitively, it doesn't catch up with the physical development. So even though kids are maturing physically earlier and earlier, we tend to look at them as if they could handle more difficult cognitive, social, psychological situations, and they just can't. So we have to, we really are, we have the responsibility to help the kids to understand that, because they don't understand it in themselves. And I do have to say too, they also don't grow with symmetry. So different parts of their body grow faster than other parts of their body, and they're very self-conscious of the way they look, and especially the way society treats physical appearance. It's very difficult on them.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the things that we would encourage you to do as you're looking at the book. We're going to touch on a few characteristics in each of those areas, but I would suggest that if you're going to work with your faculty with this, do it as part of an in-service or maybe an ongoing a book study that you do with the group. Look at each of those characteristics, and then how does that affect what I'm doing in the classroom? What are the implications there for schools and for educators based on those characteristics? I've just selected a couple of them here. There are more in the book itself, but it's a good thing for you to take a look at what are those characteristics and go, okay, is that something that I am addressing in the way I'm designing instruction? Is that something that we're providing in the overall programs and practices and policies within our school. So think about those characteristics of young adolescents and how that's impacting upon what you're doing. So if you look at these three, and Judy, I'll ask you, can you tell the story particularly that has to do with the tailbone?
Sure, this is my favorite.
It's your favorite, I know.
Yeah. Around the time of the onset of adolescence, the long bones of the arms and legs and different places where there is cartilage. It's the medical term for it is the ossification of the epiphyseal areas, and the epiphyseal tissue are those tissues that start to ossify or turn to bone. And in one particular case, right at the end of the tailbone, there is an area which at one point did have this cartilage and now is turning to bone. And as you're sitting in your chair, I hope if you're not, you can't do this if you're on your couch, but if you're on your chair, if you can feel where the pressure is on your rear end, and we tell kids, you know, sit up straight, feet on the floor, and where do you find that pressure? It's right there where the kids are ossifying, you know. And if you think about yourself in church or synagogue or whatever, or at an in-service day, how about that? Or in class for your university students, how difficult it is to sit still for long periods of time, which is, when you think about it, how often we have kids who lean back in their chairs. And if you're in a chair, try that carefully, because if you lean back in your chair, you'll see that the pressure then goes to your feet and takes the pressure off your rear end. So as a teacher, when I learned that from Conrad Tepfer, I went back and I said to the kids, all right, I'm not going to harass you anymore about leaning back in your chairs. Just please don't fall over. And I realized I had been teaching for several years at that point, and none of them had ever fallen over. So then I said, okay, if you're starting to feel antsy, you've got to be able to stand up, because we all know if you are uncomfortable physically, you can't concentrate intellectually.
So in your classroom, think about how you can provide those breaks for kids that give them a chance, maybe to stand up, to stretch, to take some pressure off that tailbone if they're sitting in those wonderful hard plastic desk chair combination things. So a simple strategy like 2 and 2, where you ask kids to partner with one another, you've provided maybe 10 minutes of direct instruction, ask them to stand up, face their partner. Partner A takes 1 minute and tells partner B what it is that you've just talked about. Partner B then tells partner A what they've gotten from it. So they've had a chance to stand up, they've been able to stretch, they've been able to rehearse the information, they can sit back down again, and off you go. So think about ways in which you can address some of those physical needs for the students in your classroom. Cognitive characteristics. Keep in mind that the brain now is going through a great deal of development from the back to the front as they're beginning to really get to that area where you're moving from concrete to abstract thinking. So if you take a look at some of these characteristics, one that resonates with me is the ability to set personal goals and think about current and future needs. That's something that the discussion that you're having with those kids in your classroom, what are their personal goals? What is it that they want to get out of your classroom? What do they want to get out of 8th grade? What do they want to get? What do they see as where their future may be taking them? Those are not just questions that are designed to be dealt with your school counselor, but those can be things that if you've got an advisory program, you're doing morning meeting, those are areas that you can address with those kids. They're interested in learning about topics that are relevant to them. So use that advisory or morning meeting time as a way in which you can gather some information as to what is important to them, where are their interests, and capitalize on that. Linda or Judy, would you add anything else into those?
Yeah, I think that's one of the that's one of the challenges that I really enjoyed as a teacher, was to take the topics we knew we were supposed to be covering, but to make them relevant so the kids really were interested in them and could relate to them. And I found that personally challenging, but I also found it very exciting. And I think it's also an opportunity. Here's a place where you can engage the students in helping you do this, you know, by setting the stage for what it is we have to learn. What do you want to know about it? How could we do this? What way would be interesting for you to learn something about this? And I think that's something that we all need to strive to do more of as we teach, because that's how you get the kid. You've got to capture them. I taught social studies, which could be the most boring subject in the known world, but I made sure that it was not that at all. I made it my goal in life to make it interesting. And even if it was ancient Egypt, you know, we developed our own hieroglyphics. We did all sorts of things to make the kids be involved in it. And I think that's really important for us to do, especially when in an age of standards and whatever. It's so easy to just whip through those standards and say, here, I've done it, check that one off. We don't need to do that to the exclusion of making it interesting to the kids. That's how they learn.
I have to add too that some of Conrad Tepfer's research was on cognitive characteristics of the kids, and he did quite a broad study and found that there were a large number of kids who, in the transition from 6th into 7th grade, started to drop out academically. And the scary thing is, when he followed up, almost 80% of the kids who started not to do well in end of 6th grade, especially beginning of 7th grade, never bounced back. And a lot of those kids ended up dropping out of school, maybe not physically dropping out, but mentally dropping out of school.
Well, so that's been further explored and amplified through the early warning indicator work that Balfance did. That's exactly what he found too, that kids actually drop out of school in the middle school. They may sit there until it's time that they can legally leave, but they've dropped out. And once they do, you can't get them back, or it's very, very difficult to get them back. So it's,
well, they think of themselves as
school. What?
They think of themselves as non-learners.
Right.
Right. You know, I am not a learner. That kid is over there, but I'm not. And if they reach that point, it is very difficult to get them back. So we have to know our kids well enough. See, go back to those relationships with the kids. We have to know them well enough to see when something's happening where they're starting to turn off. So it may not just be boredom. It may not be laziness. It may be this feeling that I am not a learner, I'm not capable. So we have to intervene immediately in order to re-engage them.
There's that saying about they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's so true. We have to go at them from who they are to get to what we want them to know.
The next area of the characteristics is dealing with the social emotional, and that is certainly more heightened during the time of COVID than perhaps at any other time, although we know that it's key and it's always been central to what we're doing with middle level kids. Look at that second bullet there, the issue of bullying. Most incidents of bullying occur during early adolescence. That's when you have that type of behavior that the kids are engaging in. It does have a profound impact on them. That's another one of the things that is contributing to the fact that that kid may want to now drop out of school. They're just sitting there biding time until their age. But think about the fact that they need that affirmation, not only from their family and important adults in their life, but their peer group. So notice who those kids are associating with. Notice who that they are interacting with. Think about ways that you might, if you are designing cooperative learning structures or things, how do you get them to expand their group so that in other ways, you are creating a greater area for tolerance and diversity behind them just looking at their own little tiny peer group. But keep in mind that that's where they want to gravitate to. They're interested in popular culture and the trends, and probably the bane of every middle level assistant principal, social media. And how is that used? How is that monitored? But think about the fact that this really goes to the basic idea of that need for the relationship piece, that every kid needs an adult advocate who knows them well. And that's where you want to think about every adult in your building. That doesn't just fall upon the teachers or the counselors, but kids make connections with all kinds of folks. It may be the school custodian, it may be the bus driver, it may be someone in the cafeteria. Look at all of those people as possibilities to serve as mentors and advocates for your kids. Judy, Linda, anything else you would add in that social emotional piece there?
I would say too, really get your kids to help you with that too. Ask them questions. If they're feeling like they don't belong, again, go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Belongingness is so important. A lot of the bullies feel like they don't belong, and they're trying to make a name for themselves. They're trying to be tough. And I found that there were kids in my classes always who were popular kids, and once I got to know them, I would find kids who had really empathetic personalities, and I would go to them individually and ask them, how about sitting with different people at lunch instead of your same crew? Would you mind doing that? And almost 100% of the times they would say, oh, that's fine, sure, I'll do that. And they would go to sit with some of the other kids, and then some of the marginal kids are watching these popular kids starting to interact with some of the other marginalized kids. So that's, using the kids to help each other too, I think is really helpful. And I think you can also use high school kids who you've had in the past, who are really empathetic people. I used to use football players who would come and talk to some of my boys to try to say, here are some things that you need to know to be successful. And one of them is you got to be kind.
We had a Saturday school program where we brought high school kids over who had been in our middle school, and we brought them back in to work with some of our at-risk kids. And it was, Judy, you're right, it was so powerful. And very often they could reach those kids much better than any of the adults were able to do. So anytime you can enlist those kids in something like that, it's powerful.
So think about the ways that those relationships really can expand beyond just student to student or student to teacher, all of the folks that you can bring in to help those kids. The last area is the psychological characteristics. And one of the things here that I think hits home is that they may begin to develop a passion for a hobby or a sport. Find out what those things are. The way that you're going to begin to make the relationships with the kids is knowing what is it that interests them. And you may then be able to connect kids together. You'll find a group of kids that share the same hobby or are interested in the same sport or the same type of music. And this is one of the ways that you can keep those connections going among the kids. Now is the time that you want them to be able to explore a myriad of opportunities. So in your school, setting up a wide variety for clubs, activities, things that you're doing during an intervention period or an enrichment period or whatever, that they have an opportunity to explore. And that's why having exploratory programs, exploratory classes at middle level is so important. And they should be courses that all kids take. I go back again to the early days where when I went to school, the girls took home economics and the boys took shop, and never the twain shall meet. But you know what? There are some girls that were pretty good in terms of building things, doing things in woodworking. And there were some guys that turned out to be some pretty good chefs. So the fact now that you look at schools where we have those programs, they're not restricted by gender. So that kids are having an opportunity to be exposed to a multitude of things and begin to find where their interests really are. They don't know what they're good at unless they've had a chance to experience a variety of things.
And in
And
this way, the psychological is really intertwined with the socio-emotional characteristics here, because again, I would add in here service learning, and Conrad would say, make sure that the kids get to meet kids who are different than they are. And if you have to go out of the school to do it, so be it. And I know that's difficult to do in this situation we have now. It's virtually impossible. But getting kids to think about the things that are in that last bullet, the race, gender, social class, religion, sexuality. The kids are exploring their own sexualities. And it's when you add that with social media and the message they're sending, it is a very turbulent time.
So we've tried to set the stage for you to say, we want you to think about who is your client, if you will. Who is it that we're there to serve? What do we know about the kids? What do we need to know about them? And how does that impact what we do? And knowing that, that's now going to help us define what are the essential attributes and the characteristics for middle school. So Linda, do you want to talk a little bit about what those essential attributes are?
Right. As I said, in the 4th edition of this, we believe, we came up with the idea of essential attributes. And I kind of look at them as when there were 4 of them, as the 4 cornerstones of your school, that all of the things you build in your school need to be centered on these essential attributes. They're very broad attributes, but if your school is not being responsive to the needs of the kids, if it is not appropriately challenging the children you have, if it's not engaging them actively in the learning, and engaging actively is the key there. If we are not working to empower students, empower them for their own learning, if we're not equitable in what we are doing, and to me, equity is one of the hardest ones to deal with. That's one of the ones that we really constantly have to look at and make sure that everything we're doing in that school there is equity in every student in that school has equal chance, equal opportunities. So when you're beginning to look at even your curriculum, your philosophy of your school, your vision, your mission, whatever it is, you need to look at it through the lens of these 5 essential attributes. And out of these came the 18 characteristics of this particular edition of this, we believe.
So here's a little definition of what those essential attributes are, that it's responsive. And I want you to look there at that first bullet that says the distinctive nature and identities of young adolescents. Think about who the kids are that are sitting in your classrooms. What identities do they bring with them? It's more than just what you can see and go, okay, yep, boys and girls, or these are Caucasian, these are Latino, these are African-American. There are other identities that are part of that. What do you know about those kids, the identities they're bringing into your classrooms? Do you know if they have a particular heritage? Are they an immigrant? Have they been in the United States fewer than 3 years? What do we know about their religious backgrounds? Are there students that are in our school that are not members of whatever the predominant faith might be in your area? Really kind of taking a look at who are those students and recognizing that we need to be aware of all of those identities that are sitting in that room.
And Gail, I would just add one more. I was a school coach out in California for a while, and the children in the school I was in were all children of illegal immigrants. And that identity is not often thought about in our schools. And there are kids like that all over the country now. And that's another identity we need to be aware of, because it brings its own particular set of challenges to the kids and to us. So I would just add that one.
Absolutely. So we won't go into each of those attributes at the moment, just because we're going to be very short on time, but want you to think about what those attributes would be. And then what are those characteristics? So we want to take a few moments, and each of us will talk a little bit about these characteristics in the 3 areas. So Linda, would you kind of walk us through culture and community.
Okay, and Gail, I'm going to add one thing before I do. I always thought in terms of this, as I looked at what was going on in my school or what I thought I wanted to do or we needed to do, if I couldn't see it in the essential attributes and the characteristics that are in this we believe, then I really had to question whether it was something we needed to do. Do we really need to do that? If we can't find a basis for it in this we believe, and we think we're a good middle school, do we really need to incorporate that practice? I think that's just an important question to keep in the back of your mind, whether it's a classroom level or a school level. You know, can we relate this back to the characteristics? So culture and community. I get very passionate about this. As I said at the beginning, if you don't have a positive culture, if you haven't brought your community into the building and made the whole community part of your building, then you're not going to get very far in any of the three areas. So culture and community has 7 characteristics. Respecting and valuing young adolescents. And there is a reason that that is #1 characteristic that's listed there, because it has to be #1. That has to come before everything else. And I'm sure you can think back on educators in your building who maybe didn't live up to that. And it's a problem because the kids see through that. So that's very important. The school environment is welcoming, inclusive, and affirming for all. And for all is the most important part of that statement. And every student's academic and personal development is guided by an adult advocate. And that can be through advisory, but if you don't have advisory periods, you can do that any number of ways. And I've been in schools where one neat way they try to attend to this is they take the school pictures of every kid in the school and they put them up on the wall, and teachers walk through that and they put a mark by every child they know. And then at the end of that exercise, they take a look at the wall, and invariably there are several children there who don't have a mark. Nobody knows those kids. There's Ciphers in the Snow. That's a great video if you've never seen it, Cipher in the Snow, about a little boy who died, and the principal was asked to do the eulogy in the school. And so he reached out to his teachers to find out about the little boy because he didn't know much about him. Nobody in that school knew anything about that child. That's what we cannot have. So you have to, through whatever means you can do, you have to make sure that every child has an adult advocate. School safety, proactively, justly, and thoughtfully. And this becomes more and more important as we go down the line here. But that is when we need to make sure we're very thoughtful and that we're not stagnant, because that's something that changes often. We need to constantly take a look at the safety issues in our school and how we're addressing those, and having comprehensive counseling and support services that really meet the needs of the kids. And part of that, to me, is enabling the counselors in the school to spend the largest bulk of their day working with students. You go into a lot of middle schools and counselors are schedulers. They're tied up in a lot of administrative tasks, and they're not spending the time they need to be spending working with the kids. So to me, that's a very important component of a good, strong middle school. Engaging your families as valued partners, however you can do that. Sometimes when kids go to the middle school, the parents are kind of lost. How do I become involved in the school, in a middle school? Because it's totally different from how they were involved in elementary school. So making sure that we engage those families in meaningful ways within our school, whether you have a local school advisory council that has parents on it, whether your teams have parent councils. A lot of my teams, they had parent councils, and the parents rotated and actually took part in helping develop some curriculum things, all sorts of ways like that. And that you collaborate constantly with community and business partners. And that needs to be a two-way street. It doesn't just need to be, we'll give you $150 to do this, or Chick-fil-A is going to give the faculty nuggets on a workday. It needs to be much more meaningful than that. So that's what we mean by culture and community. It's bringing everybody into the building in a meaningful way and having everybody build the culture of that school and be involved in the school.
Thanks, Linda. We're really running up against the clock, so we're going to try to race through these last couple things. Judy, can you just kind of hit some highlights here on curriculum instruction and assessment?
Sure. Just like there's a culture of community of the school, there should be a culture of assessment. Assessment should be giving information to the kids. It ought to be something where kids can realize I knew stuff up to this point, and then I got confused. With assessment too, some things that we need to think about on tests. So often we give kids a bonus question. One of my favorites that I've seen is what was Mickey Mouse's wife's name, and kids even said, "Well, I didn't even know he was married." Which gets no one anywhere. So how about if you're building that culture of assessment, tell me something about this subject that I didn't ask you. And you'd be amazed at what you can hear. Maybe the kids do know the subject matter, but don't know how to answer the questions you've asked. It's very difficult to write a really good assessment that it's obvious where everybody, what everybody needs to know about the question. I would also say that with curriculum and instruction, and Conrad would say this too, that it has to be relevant to the kids. Yes, there are some things that the state requires us to teach for heaven. Well, it's because politicians thought it was really important to put in the schools. But, and those things we can be honest with the kids, and you say, here we are. I don't know why it's in here, but we've got to study this. Please hang in there with me. Otherwise, we've got to make sure the kids do understand why things are important. And you'll see that second bullet: challenging, exploratory, integrative, and diverse, so that kids are problem solving. At one point, I went into a school and I asked all the teachers in the school to give me their best questions from their best tests. And I gathered those all together, sat in my living room floor, and I put together one test that was from all of the questions that these 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers were asking their kids. And I gave that test to all of the teachers. Nobody got higher than a D on the test. So what that's saying is we are sometimes asking kids to memorize small pieces of information rather than the big ideas and the problem solving. So we really need to change the way we think about that. The way I look at it is if you can Google something in 2.5 seconds, then probably kids don't need to memorize it right now. There are bigger and better things to do. And of course, the second to the last bullet, active, purposeful, democratic. And I would put in there, I think right now we need to get civic education. And if you're not familiar with it, our former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor actually put together a middle school civics education curriculum, which is really quite good. And it was she used middle level experts to help her build it. So I recommend it highly.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of zip through this last little piece. Leadership and organization. I think one of the key pieces here is that leaders demonstrate courage and collaboration, that they have to make tough decisions sometimes, but they want to be inclusive. You've got to collaborate with your staff members, with your stakeholders, your parents, your community members. It is a collaborative effort that's going to serve the needs of those young adolescents. Keep in mind too that professional learning has to be relevant, long-term, and job embedded. And that's something that you can do by using this we believe. How do you implement all of these characteristics? How do you know what you're doing in your school? So I just want to give you a quick little tool that you could take a look at. And we call this rating and ranking. So I would give something out to my faculty and say, okay, I want you to look at these characteristics of culture and community and give it a rating in our school. Do I rate it as a 5, that it's exemplary and it's a high level and everybody's doing this, all the way down to a 1? So I want to go through and I want to get a rating for where we see our school in each of those areas. And so this is what I would be doing. And I could use a number more than once. But then I would rank those same things. And you can replicate this easy enough, or if you go onto the AMLE site, these sheets are there that you can use, and you can, you don't have to create them yourself. They're already there. Rank those things in your school. What do you think is the thing out of that group that you do best? And what's the thing that you don't do very well and really need to work on? And then how do you get from A to B? It's a process known as a gap analysis, where you're going from the state that you're in right now, but you know what the ideal state is and where you want to be. Keep in mind, it doesn't often happen in a straight line. There are times when you're going to fall back and reassess and adjust your plan. But ultimately, if you work through that gap analysis, you're going to get to see what are the things that you really need to address in order to move your school to a higher level of implementation of each of those characteristics. So identify the current state of affairs. Where is it that you want to go? What does it look like? What would you see in an exemplary middle school? And then where's the gap? What are we missing? And then how do we begin to identify possible solutions for that? So these are some questions that you could ask if you were going about doing that gap analysis. And I would say do this with each section of the book. Look at culture and community, look at curriculum instruction and assessment, look at leadership and organization, work through the same process. This is a great tool to use, particularly if you're involved in doing a school improvement plan. And there are a lot of wonderful resources out there that you can be accessing to help you. Judy, can you talk a little bit about the Search Institute?
Oh my gosh, I love this site, search-institute.org. They have so much free information, and it is based on years and years of longitudinal, excellent, well-respected research. So none of it is just, this is what I think. And right now, they just added, in addition to the ones that are listed there, they just added, here are some ideas of how to instruct kids about COVID. And so you can trust what you see at that organization. And as I say, all the stuff is free that's online for educators. So please, if you do nothing else, besides buy this book, of course, is to go to this site and see what they have to say, because they've got lots of tools that you can use. I've used them even in assessment of programs, where I'll take the developmental assets and we'll have a program for young adolescents, and we'll do a pre-test and a post-test with the developmental assets, asking the kids, where are you with each of these assets? How comfortable are you with them at the beginning of the program and then at the end of the program? And we can see if there's been any progress in the way that kids feel about themselves as learners. So really good stuff.
Okay, and Linda, do you want to talk a little bit about what you can get through AMLE?
I do, because I think when you listen to something like this and a lot of information, it can seem very overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be, because AMLE is there to help you. They have unbelievable resources, and they're all about middle level. It's the go-to association for everything middle level. Their website is up there on the top of the screen. You can click on that and go down and go to the This We Believe drop-down on the drop-down menu. And there is a graphic in there that you can reproduce of the characteristics and the attributes. There's a guide to conducting a book study of the new This We Believe. I can't tell you how important that piece is, because that's how you get everybody thinking on the same page and coming from the same mindset to assess the school and try to improve it. There are lots of activities and worksheets you can use in professional development. There is a toolkit, which is a school improvement assessment, and it has been, there was one before, this one's been revised, and it matches the characteristics in This We Believe. And that is an invaluable thing for your staff to take so that they get an idea of where their school is. There's also a coaching program that's available. There are a lot of professional development presentations. There are a presenter's cadre, a professional cadre that you can tap into to find people that can help you with everything. And then the online courses that are being developed to explore all of these attributes and characteristics. I have used NMSA, AMLE my whole professional life. They are my go-to. It's the most valuable organization I belong to. It would never occur to me not to renew my membership every year. It's the place you go when you want to grow. So,
And think about the fact that both the Pennsylvania Association and the National Association is an inclusive group. It is not like the National Science Teachers or the National Council for Social Studies or ISTE, if you're the technology folks. This particular group represents everybody. So it's a lot of like-minded people who are really concerned about what it is that is necessary to provide the best for young adolescents. So needless to say, we have a ton of information that we would be happy to share with you, but unfortunately the time just doesn't allow it. So we thank you for what you have spent with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Bruce right now.
Oh yeah, we would like to thank you all for being part of this webinar tonight. I'd like to personally thank Eastern University, who's a partner of PAMLE, and they sponsor our webinars. They sponsor each of our webinars each month. So we truly appreciate the support of Eastern University. I think I'd like to thank Gail, Linda, and Judy for your expertise on This We Believe, as well as, you know, the founding fathers, because this isn't something that's brand new and has not been, this has been going on for years and years and years. And, you know, we want to thank them for that. You know, this, as I know somebody wrote in here, is this going to be available? Yeah, this was recorded. This will be put on the PAMLE website. So you'll have access to this recording if you want to go back later on and check this out and look at some of these other resources. And as you can see on the screen, you know, our next webinar is on January 13th with Jen Cord. She's going to be talking about navigating uncertainty. You know, we don't know what's coming down the road. You know, we look a lot at what are these kids going to be like when they come back. So Jen's going to do a lot of talking about this uncertainty and how we can try to deal with some of that as we look forward and we get into February and March, and who knows what's going to happen from that. So again, I'd like to thank you all for being part of this presentation, and hopefully we'll see you all again in January. Have a great holiday season. Hopefully you'll be able to get some rest, and thank you for everything that you do for middle level kids, because it's so important. Those connections that you make with these kids is just incredible. So thank you all so much.